Hey friends, this is Bailey. Welcome to the Bailey Grind, where we talk about books, mythology, esoterica, writing. Soon, I promise. Soon, I promise. It is 90 degrees out. It feels like it's 100. I'm on a staycation, and all I can do is just lay in bed. I don't do well with that. I have a whole bunch of, if you saw my Edith Wharton video, I have a whole bunch of shoulds swimming in my brain. I should do this, I should do that. I should make my bed before filming, but look, my dogs love when it's not made, so sorry. I filmed this video already, but I realized I mess with the microphone way too much. Way too much. I'm hoping you can hear me. The microphone's a little further away, and since filming this video just a couple days ago. Okay, let's not lick ourselves while I'm filming, please. Stop. Since filming this video a couple days ago, I already finished a couple books. So these are the books that I'm currently reading, and they have so much to do with my research projects right now and what I'm going to be writing about. So I'm writing about, right now I'm working on a couple projects, but the main one is about a woman who grew up in the Victorian era for 30 years. And then she was very much into the Edwardian progressive era here in Indiana. So she had already, seen the industrial age, and then she moved out into rural Indiana, and she started a farm and basically had to figure out how to survive. She's super cool. I will tell you much more about her at some point, but because she was married to someone who's famous, or who was famous, then we actually have a lot of records of her because his house is a museum. So we now have, the historians at the estate sent me a PDF document full of the books that are in her library. So in order to research her and get into her mindset, I'm reading the books that were in her library. Surprisingly, or not so surprisingly, because I was drawn to her for a reason, I've read a lot of the books that she has in her library. So some of them are rereads, but also before, it's next to impossible to get people to respond to you now via email. Especially, I don't really get it because it's their job. It's their job. I understand that we're all, underpaid and there's too many, or there's not enough employees. I get that. Trust me. I make minimum wage. I get it. But anyways, because it took them so long to get back to me, I created a hypothetical list for this lady that I'm researching. And so one of these books is on the hypothetical list and it isn't in her library, but it has her energetic imprint. Let's just get into it. Okay? I need to stop giving you the caveats. The first book that I'm reading, well, not the first, but the first book I'll tell you about is The Magnificent Ambersons by Booth Tarkington. Booth Tarkington was in Indianapolis. I believe he was born in the 1870s and died 1940s, 1950s. Fact check me on that. It's somewhere around there. We have the Booth Tarkington Theater, we have Booth Tarkington Neighborhood, we have all of these things named after him, but ask one person in Indianapolis or one Hoosier who Booth Tarkington was, and they won't be able to tell you, which is kind of flabbergasting when you look at his history, because he won 2 Pulitzer prizes and was well known, renowned internationally for The Magnificent Ambersons. And I believe that there's only been 8 people in history that have won 2 Pulitzer prizes. And while I'm not a prize girly, I don't read from the list or anything, and I honestly think most of them are probably extremely flawed, I still think it's remarkable that we don't know him as Hoosiers. So The Magnificent Ambersons is pre-Great Gatsby, but it's very much, it has like threads. It has similarities. It's about a rich family, the Ambersons. They're actually based off of a real family in Indianapolis. And I moved out of the neighborhood that family created. Does that make sense to you if you're not from Indiana? Okay, so Woodruff Place is the neighborhood I moved out of. I actually lived in Woodruff Place 3 times. And it's 3 parallel streets that have like fountains and statues, and they still have the like historic like thingies that you tie horses up to, and it's all just beautiful like Queen Anne mansions. I of course lived in like an apartment within the Queen Anne mansions, but the Ambersons are based off of the Woodruffs, so that's really cool for me. But I also think that this is extremely interesting. I didn't even tell you. Okay, so it's following 3 generations within this family. All right, so it's like a East of Eden meets Great Gatsby kind of thing. But like Edith Wharton in The Age of Innocence or House of Mirth, it's chronicling the time period within the society. And Booth Tarkington really did not like what the industrial age was doing, because he was seeing that, for example, he hated cars. So he was seeing that cars were requiring much more room on the street, and so lots of old trees were being knocked down. And he was seeing that neighbors were becoming disconnected from one another, and that has like a large influence in this book. Like that's like the motivating drive, I believe, for his writing in the first place. So you don't have to be obviously from Indiana to appreciate this. I not many people in Indiana even knew about it, so I think that you can be from anywhere to appreciate it. But even within like the first 5 pages, I dog-eared a whole bunch of stuff. Well, not dog-eared, but so like he goes deep into the fashion of 1873. He talks about the different rooms and the architecture, which is cool, like the parlors and, you know, what everything was made for. Then there's like musical albums that I guess everyone just knew. I mean, not even albums, because, I mean, how many people had the gramophone? See, the history, man. History is complex. Anyways, this is a book I'm reading. Oh, my girls that I'm researching were friends with Booth Tarkington, so that's a bonus. And then within the library of 2 of the girls that I'm researching is Middlemarch by George Eliot, or Mary Ann Evans? Mary Ann Evans? Was that her real name? I forget. This was published in... Oh yeah, so Mary Ann Evans. She was born in England in 1819. And when was this published? The 1800s. Okay. Mid 1800s. And it's a study in provincial life. So it's about... It's a big old book. And it's about... the village of Middlemarch and all of the people within. And it's kind of like this bird's eye view of the citizens within Middlemarch. And sometimes, sorry, there's dog hair everywhere. Sometimes they're overlapping, like their stories, you know, blend in together, weave into one another. I have some qualms, okay? So it's following so many different people that you rarely, I feel as though you rarely get into the actual minds of people. And it's a lot of dialogue. So there's only one character that I really feel like I've been given access into her mind. And so therefore, of course, I'm like obsessed with her. Her name's Dorothea. But all the other characters I feel very disconnected from. And because we're following so many different people, you leave them in one place in their life. And you don't meet them until they've gone through a few things. And I really wish like Dorothea had her own book. But what I want to discuss is the idea of classic literature. Because I feel like this is a great... Now, again, I'm just a little over halfway, so it could turn into like my favorite novel of all time let's give it some grace for that. But when researching this book, I was trying to find people who have read it, like reviews on YouTube, and I kept getting met with these reviews where people were saying that they didn't feel smart enough to describe why this book was so good. So that was like red flag number one. And then I tried to research what scholars, because scholars are less likely to give you spoilers, I found, with like certain lectures, because they're doing a Hawkeye view again. And I found that a lot of them were saying this is one of like the top 10 greatest English novels in history. And it's because of the social commentary. Then there's also other people that are saying that this book makes you work for it. Okay, so combining all of these three things, I don't think that just because a book, quote unquote, makes you work for it, that means it's difficult in a good way. I find that this book is making me work for it because it's boring. And when a book, I've read plenty of books, you know, let's talk about a contemporary. So Jane Austen, she has a ton of social commentary in her books. I mean, we're still completely unraveling her today. She has that much social commentary in her books. And yet they're so extremely enjoyable. And they're hilarious. And I want to keep going. I'm connected to actually all of the characters, not even just the protagonist. This is completely different. And I don't really understand it. I don't really understand the hype. The other thing is that because it's about a village, I expected like a rural Thomas Hardy kind of like really describing the setting. But honestly, there's so few excerpts or passages about the scenery or the landscape that you could put Middlemarch anywhere. And it would be like, I could put Middlemarch in Ohio and you wouldn't notice a difference. So I'm having a hard time with this. I'm thinking about DNFing it, but it is one of those things where it's like, this is kind of just for research and to get into these women's minds. And tons of people were reading this. It was very famous. So I kind of feel like I have to do it for the research. And to be honest, I'm on page like 450 something. So let me know what you think of Middlemarch. Like, did you like it? Who's your favorite character? Why is this such a to-do? I don't get it. And again, you have to remember, like, I went to school for English literature. Like, I've read a lot of difficult books, and I've read a lot of books with social commentary, and I still don't understand why this is. Maybe it'll change my mind. Okay. So this is the book I was saying that wasn't in my girl's library, but it has her energetic imprint. And that's The Country of the Pointed Firs by Sarah Orne Jewett. And it definitely was written in the 1800s. Let me look real quick. Sorry, I always forget to do this. It was published in 1896. So that would have been prime time for my chick. And this is about a woman who goes to a small village in Maine. And again, it's kind of like about the town and the members within the town. However, this is beautiful nature writing. So she's on the coast in a small cottage. She's sharing it with an herbalist. And although she doesn't call her an herbalist, people come around for like tonics and stuff. And so she's describing how the ocean air is bringing up the smell of like thyme and pennyroyal underneath her bedroom window in the summer. Like, there's really cool little passages like that, but it really is only vibes. So these are vignettes about the history of a lot of the old people in the town. And there's little, like, some of that nature writing that's helping me kind of understand my girl, because For example, she talks about how all of the bees are attracted to her while she's writing outside. And that's because back then, the ink was infused with bergamot, the flower. That's cool. That's really cool. You don't find that in like a history book unless you're like researching the history of ink. So there's little things like that where it's reminding me how important it is to immerse myself in this world and in this time period. But I have been reading it for like 2 months now, and I'm only on page 59. So again, no real plot. You kind of have to be there for the vibes. I'm not sure I love it, but I love the little moments of nature writing that actually have really inspired me. And I think those are the moments I'll remember. I probably won't remember much about the people. Although, I will say, my lady moved to rural Indiana in 1907, and she had to completely change the way she was socially because she moved from industrial Indianapolis, like middle to upper class, and then rural Indiana where nobody could even read. And so she had to really change and understand the people. And so I think it's kind of cool to have the vignettes that are how do I say this? The vignettes that are solely about each individual within a town. Okay. Another book in her library is The Awakening and Other Stories by Kate Chopin. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. This is the 4th time I'm reading this. So the first time I read The Awakening, I was in high school, and I remember thinking, holy moly, this is why I want to teach English. And that's because it was probably one of the first times I read a realistic ending. I mean, you have to think about like that. In high school, you're reading, I read epics, I read tragedies, like Shakespearean tragedies, but not really like, this is realist. And then I read it a few more times, and what's funny is on Goodreads, I only have it at a 4-star. But if anybody asked me what my favorite book was, this would be on like my top 5. It's The Awakening. It's very short, by the way. I said it's a short story, but it was written in the 1800s, published in the early 1900s, I believe. I just made that up. Let's look. 1890s. Okay, so she's American too, Kate. And this is about Edna Pontellier, and she is married. They're middle to upper class. It's hard to figure out exactly what they are. They're not high class, but middle to upper. In the South, in I think New Orleans, and she is unhappy in marriage, and she's unhappy being a mom of 2 boys. The surface level kind of background to this book. There's so many layers, and I'm realizing that it's just so important to reread books that hit you, because now, without spoiling anything, now I'm seeing how the nature, again, kind of like Barbara Kingsolver, my video about Barbara Kingsolver, how nature is used to stand in for Edna's emotions. So what the narrator does is they describe Edna and her, what she's going through, but then you kind of zoom out. Like, imagine it being like a movie. You zoom out, and then you're just faced towards the ocean, to hear the ocean and to smell the ocean and to see it. And then you come back the next day. I think that's brilliant. And I was doing a ton of research on Saturday at the campus because I can print things off there. And nobody was in this building. It was a really large building, and I was there for 3 hours. 0 people. It was even dark. It was weird. And I was researching literary criticism about The Awakening because I already know the ending. And a lot of scholars were talking about how this isn't necessarily a good short story. and that it's just the content and not her writing. And I absolutely disagree with that. And I'd like to do a whole video about her and the awakening at some point if you're interested. I guess I wouldn't be able to do spoiler free. It would have to have spoilers. I'm sorry. But let me know if you're interested in that. I think her writing, again, it's kind of like nature writing. I think her writing is really, really amazing. Nature is a protagonist. Yeah, it's very similar to how I felt about Barbara Kingsolver. Okay, well, I'm reading this for the 4th time. I think it's also extremely interesting that my lady had this in her library, because it's, if you know, you know. Anyways, okay. Lastly, before I get a few more books this week. Lastly is Morgan Le Fay, The Shapeshifter by Jill M. Hebert. I've had this on my TBR for a very long time. It is out of print. It is part of the Arthurian and Courtly Cultures series. It's extremely expensive to get, but it's a library book at the university that I work at. So I was finally able to get it along with a couple other Morgan Le Fay books that are out of print. This is purely academic. It's purely for people who know so much about the Arthurian tales, the different versions of them, the different translations of them. Like, it goes too deep if you only know Le Mort. Like, if you only know Mallory, I wouldn't recommend this. But I find the idea of the shapeshifter to be really intriguing. I've always resonated with the idea of the shapeshifter. I can never really fit someone's box of who I am. People have always had a really hard time figuring me out. Am I a hipster? Am I a jock? Am I a hippie? Am I, that was like the high school thing. Nobody could figure it out. And I didn't have a friend group. I always kind of just like went around and had a friend in a group and, would hang out. And I've noticed that women throughout history, but specifically since like the Protestant age, have been really just good or bad. You're a good woman or you're a bad woman. And this shows up in like different, not translations, but different Circe, like different depictions of Circe, the Greek goddess, for example. She wasn't actually, she probably came from like Inanna and all of that, but we won't get into it. Now Circe has become this like sorceress that's evil, kind of like Morgan Le Fay. And actually, if you look at the trade routes, just throwing that out there. But I also see it in things like, it's not just women, although it's largely women, like the good or bad thing. And I want to talk about that with Edith Wharton's Age of Innocence here in another video. But it's also men. So like The Northman, which is that Norse movie that came out with one of the Skarsgård guys, and Anya Taylor-Joy, is that her name? That was not well received when it came out, except for people who love Norse history, because it's the authentic, I think, because it's the authentic version of Hamlet or Hamnet, which is an ancient story that has completely morally gray characters. We also have a movie like The Last Duel, which had really bad reception, and it has really morally gray characters. Firebrand kind of steps into the morally gray characters. And my theory is that morally gray characters are really symbolic of nature, because nature is neither good nor bad. And we were more obviously in touch with nature. Sorry. Okay, so that's part of my shape-shifting research that I'm doing and writing about. If you're interested, I can probably do like a whole other video about this. I'm such a nerd. But that's what I'm understanding with Morgan Le Fay, is that the more societies got away from the like Celtic and ancient Britannic nature, the more you see Morgan Le Fay as this bad enchantress, which I already like had a theory about. But then what I like most about this book is the introduction, actually, which is the way with academia sometimes. It's like the introduction and the conclusion, or the middle part is them proving, you know, the evidence, and the introduction and the conclusion is where like a lot of the meat is. But this writer is even talking about getting away from archetypes because they box people in. So even using the shapeshifter archetype is working against the shapeshifter. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So those are the books I'm reading right now. I'm sure I'll probably add some more to the list. I figured, why not tell you about what I'm doing instead of doing the arbitrary wrap-ups. And yeah, let me know what you want to see next, because I think I threw a lot of things out there. I would like to talk about the Writing Muse, of course. I'd like to do that. And if you want to know actually about the chick I'm researching, I'm probably going to be working on that research for a couple of years, so I can divulge. Let me know. All right. I gotta go get ready for line dancing now. Talk to you soon. Bye.